So let's talk about week 1 of the NFL season. It obviously started last Thursday, Bears versus the Packers. It was a game last year that was really exciting because Khalil Mack had just gotten traded there. He had only been there for like a couple weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks. The first half was nothing but the Bears. They were scoring all the points. Khalil Mack was going off on defense. He ended up having like a forced fumble, a pick, a strip sack. Like he like set some record for like defensive performance in his first NFL, like in a game with a new team or whatever. But then the Packers stormed back and they won that game, and it was crazy because we were like, wow, you know, Aaron Rodgers has still got it. And then the Packers really didn't do that well that year or last year. And then this game, the game this year was awful. It really wasn't anything special. The final score of the game was like 10-3. The Packers were really the only team doing anything, and that was mainly because Mitchell Trubisky just really couldn't do anything in the passing game. And I don't know if that's any credit. I will give some credit to the Packers secondary and defense because they went out and they spent some money on Adrian Amos on the back end. They drafted Darnell Savage. They drafted Josh Jackson and Jair Alexander last year. They drafted Rashawn Gary this year. They paid Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith up front to go do work for them. So I think it paid off. They held the Bears to only 3 points. A lot of that was Mitchell Trubisky not really being as good of a quarterback as he was last year in this game. And Matt LaFleur really sold my fantasy teams. He was giving the ball to like, I don't know. It was guys just getting open and the scheme was working. Like Jimmy Graham, Geronimo Allison, and Martez Valdez-Scantling. Or Martez Valdez-Scantling. I can't remember his first name. But those were the guys getting open. And on a lot of my fantasy teams, I took Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams. So those guys really didn't get anything done. I also think that the Miami Dolphins have to be the worst football team in Florida. Notice how I said Florida and not the NFL, because I'm very confident that Florida, Miami, UCF, Florida State, FAU, FIU, and like youth football teams, IMG and American Heritage, which are really good high schools in Florida, if you guys didn't know that. Those teams could beat the Miami Dolphins. They are so bad. Trading Laramie Tunsil, at that point they're just stocking up on picks. So I hope that they replace him at some point, because it was very apparent that the Miami offensive line cannot block. They can't play any type of defense. They can't get any pressure on the quarterback. They can barely run the ball. It's the worst roster I've seen in football in a while. Because some of those Browns rosters weren't awful. The quarterbacks were just bad, and the defense had some issues, but like this is all around the worst football roster I've seen in a long time. I mean, they are so bad that they made Lamar Jackson look like a real quarterback. And I know that that's just jokes, whatever. He had a very good game, 324 yards, 5 touchdowns, 158.3 passer rating, which is a perfect passer rating. He is also the youngest NFL quarterback to ever get a perfect passer rating. 2 players got perfect passer ratings this weekend, Dak Prescott and him. Patty Mahomes, I think, was pretty close, but I think he threw too many incompletions. But, you know, it was a it was a really bad game. There were a bunch of players, apparently, that went to their agents saying that they wanted to get traded. And my question is, where was that energy after they lost 42-17 to the Vikings last year and 42-17 to the Bills? So, like, where was the energy last year where nobody came out after those games, after those just colossal ass whoopings and said, oh, we want to get traded? I think it's now after they traded Kenny Stills and Laramie Tunsil that everybody's like, yeah, we don't want to be here anymore. We want to play for a competitor, not somebody who's just going to tank. So, oh well. The Steelers offense just didn't look good at all. I've got a friend who's a Steelers fan, and he was saying that like the play calls weren't that bad, like weren't this weird or bad or odd last year, and it's the same offensive coordinator, so I don't really know what's going on. But you know, it's crazy that last year Antonio Brown was on the Steelers and that this year he's on the Patriots. I mean, and that they played each other in the opening game, and that if he would have been signed 2 hours earlier, he could have played. Like, football is a crazy sport, and Antonio Brown is a crazy person, and I never would have thought that he would have left Pittsburgh the way that he did, left Oakland the way that he did, got to Oakland in general, and ended up on the pit. Like, this whole thing is just, it's nuts. It's insane. In case you guys didn't know, John Ross is still a football player in the NFL. That was a surprise to me too. He had 2 touchdowns. He had like 150 yards. He had some really good catches. He was just playing uncharacteristically good. Under Marvin Lewis, he just really wasn't getting any playing time. Marvin Lewis has like a tendency to not really like start rookies or anything like that, which is really, really weird. But John Ross's first 2 seasons in the NFL were quite bad. And the person that he was picked in front of is, like, you guys might know him. He was a number 10 pick in that 2017 draft. His name's Patrick Mahomes. You guys might know him, but he's like pretty good. So John Ross being picked in front of him and then having the last 2 seasons be pretty bad in terms of, you know, production and stuff. It's really nice to see him actually start balling out and playing like he did at Washington. And DK Metcalf played pretty good too. He had like 89 yards. Chris Carson went off. This is a scary Seattle Seahawks offense. They've got guys like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, David Moore, Nick Vannett, Will Dissly, Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, Russell Wilson. If they can just shore up this offensive line, they will be an insane team to play against. And there was another game. Another game on Sunday. The Cleveland Browns, eventual Super Bowl champions, is what everybody was crowning them before the game. And after the game in Cleveland, like, everybody was just ripping the Browns, saying that they suck, they're not good, blah, 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 all this stuff. It's the first game. There's a lot of new pieces. A lot of people have gone. A lot of people have come in. It's going to take a while for these dudes to get on the same page. And they played like a top 5 defense in the NFL the first game of the season. So it's not like they rolled into Cincinnati played a really good game against Seattle, but Cincinnati's typically a really good first half of the season team anyway. Like, I mean, it's not like they rolled up to Miami and played Miami. They would have put up 59. The Browns would have put up 59 on Miami just like the Ravens did. They just happened to play a really, really good defense. Baker did not look all that well, not all that well. He didn't look all that good playing. He had 3 interceptions, just some questionable decision making. He looked pretty flustered in the pocket, and that offensive line didn't really give him a lot of time to do anything productive anyway. He got sacked 5 times. He was really, really hurried. He got the ball to his playmakers a good amount, though. I wish they would have run it more. I think that was something they got away from. They just they got down and they tried to pass it, and that just made it easy for, you know, Mike Vrabel and Kevin Byard and all those. Like, it made it easy for the coaches and the players to call defensive schemes and make plays because they knew that the Browns weren't not going to pass it. And the craziest thing is not that the Browns lost by 30, but the fact that Odell Beckham Jr. walked on a football field with $350,000 on his wrist and, oh, by the way, played in it. So if you guys don't know what a Richard Mille is, it is a designer watch. It's like a Rolex. It's not like a Rolex, but it is a high-end luxury watch. They're very expensive. You've probably heard rappers rap about them. But Odell Beckham Jr. was wearing one of them on the field, and apparently he's gonna get fined because wearing a watch it is against the league's rule for like bracelets and arm wear in a game or whatever. And apparently Odell said he's gonna keep wearing it, so Odell just flexed too hard and Roger Goodell got mad and just had to fine him or whatever. But it's just crazy that Odell Beckham Jr. played a football game with like 10 times my college loan debt on his wrist. This is the second year in a row that we got a tie in week 1. Ladies and gentlemen, peak football is back. The Cardinals and the Lions tied a football game. That's something that you probably would have heard like 4 years ago when both of these when the Lions were like decent, but like I didn't expect this game to end in a tie. It was honestly one of the worst offensive first halves of football that I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, I would have rather watched my high school football team lose by 50 2 weekends ago than I would have. Like, I was watching this game. I was clicking between like this and the Seattle game on like Reddit streams or whatever, and I would watch like 2 plays and I'd be like, that was awful, and I would just watch the Seattle game for like 2 or 3 series, and I'd click back and it would be Kyler Murray scrambling out of the pocket, throwing a pass downfield to nobody to get picked off or whatever. But there were some bright spots. TJ Hawkinson looked like what everybody thought Eric Ebron was going to be for them, but he's a little bit more agile on his feet. Eric Ebron's more of a go up and get it, over the middle, you know, possession catch, red zone target. TJ Hawkinson's more of a, you know, drag, like run across the field, get open in the middle of the field and make plays with your feet type of tight end, and he can block too. He set the NFL record for most receiving yards by a tight end in their NFL debut with 131. He also added a touchdown with that, so he looks like actually a really, really good pick. I don't think the Lions reached on him at all. I thought that he was more of like a Talent-wise, I thought that he was maybe like the 20th to like 30th most talented player in the class, and I thought he was going to get picked somewhere in like the late like 8, 9, 10 to like the middle teens. I thought that's where he was going to end up, and he got picked at 8 by the Lions, or 9, wherever their pick was, so I don't think it was a reach or anything, but he looks like a really, really good player. But he honestly got outshined a little bit by the other team's first-round pick, who was Kyler Murray, the number 1 overall pick. Awful first half. One of the worst quarterbacking first halves I've ever seen. At one point, he was like 8 for 11 with like 20-something, or like 3 for 7 with like 20-something yards. Like, it was not a good performance until the second half came around. He threw a couple touchdowns to Larry Fitz and Christian Kirk. And he threw one to David Johnson, I think. Or he threw one to David Johnson. He had a 2-point conversion to Christian Kirk. That in overtime, he looked a little bit sluggish. But how they got to overtime was crazy. The Lions blew an 18-point fourth quarter lead. Classic Detroit Lions right there, just blowing just insane leads. That would have been how the Cardinals played this year, was how the Lions were playing 2 years ago, when they had that where they only had like 9 wins that year, but all 9 of their wins came on drives within like the last 2 minutes of the game. That's how the Cardinals were playing. The Cardinals were playing like the 2017 Lions out here. Deshaun Jackson is back on the Philadelphia Eagles. This is something that I had been waiting on since he left the Eagles, in that whole Chip Kelly player, like when everybody's coming out and saying Chip Kelly hates black people and he hates all of his black players and all this stuff. And when Deshaun Jackson left for the Redskins in the middle of that turmoil, I was like, God, I just want him back on this team. And boy, did they need him. They didn't really have a deep threat. Nelson Aguilar had been inconsistent his first 2 years. Alshon Jeffrey is more of a possession over the middle type guy. He can go up and get you balls on the sidelines, but he's not burning anybody deep. But that is Deshaun Jackson's sole purpose on the football field. He had 154 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Eagles were playing awful in the first half, and they were down 20-7, and then the Redskins blew a lead, and I think they ended up winning the game like 30-something to 20. It was like 36-28. I can't remember the exact score, but Philly came back and won. And Carson Wentz had a really good game, and he's looking like an MVP candidate. Speaking of somebody who's looking like an LVP candidate, least valuable player, Jameis Winston. I'm convinced. You know, I was really high on him, so I took him in like a couple of my fantasy drafts. I was really high on him. I like Bruce Arians. I like the system he runs. It's a vertical, press the ball down the field system. Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, O.J. Howard. Ronald Jones is kind of a weapon. I don't know. But I was hyped for Jameis Winston. I was buying in on the Jameis Winston hype. I was like, this is the year. It's a contract year. He can turn it around. They don't need to draft a quarterback. And he goes out, and against a football team, the San Francisco 49ers, that have had a bad defense last 2 years. They had 2 interceptions all of last year. They had the worst turnover ratio or differential in the entire league last year. They had 2 interceptions. The team alone, 2 interceptions last year. Jameis Winston threw them 3 interceptions. He is broken. Nobody can fix him. Not even Bruce Arians. Not even the dude who took Carson Palmer from damn near retirement to a 35 touchdown performance and almost an MVP winner. That's what he took Carson Wentz to. If he can't fix Jameis Winston, nobody can. The Colts played really, really well against the Chargers despite not having Andrew Luck. Jacoby Brissett looked pretty good. The running game was going off. Marlon Mack was having a day. And Malik Hooker had a catch of the year, saving Keenan Allen from would have been his 3rd touchdown on the game. Or at that point, it would have been his 2nd, but it would, if he had still would have caught that other one, it would have been his 3rd. Malik Hooker just running across the field, just one-hand picks it and keeps going oh, no big deal, I just caught a one-handed pick, not going to break stride, just runs right out of the end zone. That's probably play of the year so far right there. And I'm not sure if Kellen Moore is 16 or 36, because I remember him playing at Boise State and he looked like he was 16, and then when he was backing up Dak Prescott, he still looked like he was 16, and I know he's not 16, but he's definitely not 26, so he has to be 36. But anyway, I was really nervous about him taking over for Scott Linehan, even though Scott Linehan was he has all these weapons and he didn't really do all that much with it in Dallas. I was really excited to see what Kellen Moore would do, and it's an okay test to be going up against the Giants. They really have no talent outside of BJ Hill, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Jabril Peppers, so I think it's an okay test your first week of the season as a new offensive coordinator, but once they start playing teams like the Eagles and Redskins with good defenses, I think we'll get to see if Kellen Moore is the real deal as an offensive coordinator or not. Jerry Jones is now going to have to back up the Brinks truck for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott threw for 400 plus yards, 4 touchdowns, and he was also the other player that I said at the beginning of the video who had the perfect passer rating in week 1. He went off, and him to Michael Gallup was a connection that was pretty inconsistent last year. They couldn't get on the same page, and they got on the same page this game. He had like 9 receptions for 158 or like 154 yards. He was just absolutely going off. And now Jerry Jones has to pay Dak, and he might say Dak who, and they might sell more t-shirts or whatever, but he's probably going to have to pay Dak now. I am ready to crown Christian McCaffrey as the greatest white person of all time. He had a 40-point fantasy performance. He had like 129 rushing yards, 80 receptions, or 80 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and he's buff as hell. If you saw the play where he was getting tackled by Dante Fowler and Michael Brockers around his legs, and he's falling forward, and he just Hulk smashes his hand into the ground. You can see all of his muscles just tense up. That boy is big body. I'm telling you, he's in the weight room 24/7. And he just is huge. And they would have won that game. The Panthers would have won that game if DJ Moore didn't fumble every time he caught the football. I don't think I started him in one of my fantasy leagues, but I was switching. Those were the early games. I was switching between that and the Chiefs game, and every time I switched over, it was like DJ Moore not catching the ball or fumbling the ball. So Cam Newton was literally about to throw a fit. Every time that they came off the field on offense, Cam Newton looked like he was going to throw a fit. I think the surprise game of the weekend was, other than the Raiders game, was probably the Falcons versus the Vikings. I think a lot of people wrote the Vikings off. They said they weren't going to be good. They expected the Falcons to have a bounce-back season. They wanted them to play really, really well. Their defense is healthy now. Matt Ryan's back in the fold. Julio, Calvin Ridley, Austin Hooper, Devontae Freeman. And it was not a good showing for that Atlanta Falcons team. The Vikings put up numbers. They were really, really good on defense. Dalvin Cook isn't injured for once. We got to clap it up for him for not being injured. Kirk Cousins played he looked good. And all these offensive weapons for the Falcons, for what? For what? Why do you have Calvin Ridley? Why'd you draft Calvin Ridley in the first round? Last year. Not last year, well, not this draft that happened, but 2018. Why'd you draft him? What are you doing? You got Julio and him and Mohamed Sanu and Austin Hooper and Devontae Freeman for what? If you can't beat anybody, why you got all these offensive weapons? Speaking about the 2018 draft class, talking about Calvin Ridley on the Falcons, they didn't really need to take him, but they felt like they needed a wide receiver too, so they took him. 2 teams that needed quarterbacks in the 2018 draft took them, and they played this weekend. It was Sam Darnold versus Josh Allen, and it was a very Sam Darnold versus Josh Allen, what I would have expected from them their rookie years. Both of them played pretty sloppy, inefficient, inaccurate rookie football in their second year, but both of their teams have the teams that they were facing. The Bills have a good defense and the Jets have a good defense, so it's understandable why both of those guys would struggle. Hopefully they can both put up 40 points against the Dolphins again, like they did last year. But I don't know who had a worse game. I would say that Sam Darnold did, but he looked more like a quarterback than Josh Allen did. Josh Allen just looked like Cam Newton if Cam Newton didn't know how to control his body. That's how Josh Allen plays. Josh Allen just plays he plays football like a football dude plays basketball. A football dude plays basketball, totally out of control, super physical, super erratic, not knowing how to control anything. That's how Josh Allen plays football. The real football game, the game that he gets paid millions of dollars to play. That's how he plays football. And, he came away with the win somehow. He, John Brown caught that touchdown. I don't know how he caught it. It was I was watching that play, and in my head, I was just seeing Bo Nix throw the ball to that dude at the front of the end zone for the Auburn game. So, I don't know. I thought the Jets looked okay. Le'Veon Bell also might die running behind this Jets offensive line. They are not a good group, and he might have to touch the ball 500 times this year, and he might die on the 501 rep, 501st rep. And this weekend, my Kansas City Chiefs played in the Shoulder Injury Bowl, specifically clavicle injuries. Tyreek Hill and Nick Foles both had clavicle injuries. Nick Foles broke his, and Tyreek Hill had one where if it was a clavicle injury, and if it would have bent inwards toward his sternum, it would have been like, it was a clavicle connection to the sternum injury. If it would have like pressed inward on his chest, it would have been awful. And if it would have gone outward, which I think it did, it's not going to be as big of a deal as it would have been if it would have pressed inward on his chest. So he's going to be okay. They think he might go on IR, but designate him for a return because he's probably going to be out 2 months, because that's what a Packers wide receiver who had it last year, he was out for 2 months. And, you know, that made me a little upset that Tyreek Hill got hurt and that Nick Foles got hurt, because I like Nick Foles. You always hate to see a starting quarterback for a team go down, especially when he just got there and all that stuff. But I was upset a little bit, but Myles Jack was quite upset too, for who knows what reason. So he was guarding Sammy Watkins on like some curl route or comeback route in the end zone. And like Sammy Watkins shoved him down, and he like stood there and said something, which Sammy Watkins had the right to say, because he had like, at that point he had like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's probably like, y'all can't guard me or something like that. And Myles Jack got fed up, stood up, pushed him. Demarcus Robinson, being like the mediating voice, pushed Myles Jack, which is what you get for pushing somebody. And then he turned around and punched Demarcus Robinson, and then turned around and punched Sammy Watkins, and then punched Demarcus Robinson again. And then he acted like a complete and total infant walking off the field. He was like, coaches and players, like, they took like 2 or 3 minutes, probably like 5 minutes, reviewing everything, making sure they didn't need to kick out any more players than what they were already kicking out of the game. And then he was just like acting like a child, like they were like shoving him, and he was like trying to fight people after he had already been kicked out of the game. Like, it was ridiculous. And Myles Jack was, you know, abusing Sammy Watkins, like beating him up and stuff, but Sammy Watkins abused the entire Jacksonville Jaguars secondary. There was a clip of him just absolutely getting dirty on Jalen Ramsey for a touchdown. Like, he went off. This is the Sammy Watkins we all wanted to see coming out of Clemson. He's finally in a good, like, he had never really been in a crazy good offense. When he was in Buffalo, that offense was a run-first offense, and he was expected to just catch the ball like whenever, and they never really designed him to get open. They just designed him to run routes. Like in Kansas City, he's getting designed to get open. He was only in Los Angeles for like half a season, so we really didn't get to see his full potential in that offense, but I'm sure it would have been crazy too. And last but not least, the Monday night games were some very, very good football games. That New Orleans-Houston game was crazy. Deshaun Watson, in terms of pure talent, I'm talking talent. I'm not talking about, you know, record or whatever. In terms of talent, the ability to make plays with his feet, make plays with his arm, improvise, just stand in the pocket and throw dots, absolute dots. He's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Now that Andrew Luck is gone, now I don't think that Drew Brees, I mean, he could be a top 5 quarterback, but he is not as talented as Deshaun Watson is. It's like Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson are the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL because they can do stuff with their legs and their arms, and they can combine those out of the pocket, inside the pocket. They can do it all, and he's insane. Getting Kenny Stills was a great addition, even though I like Kiki QT more. I think Kenny Stills is a good slot weapon. He's a good stretch the field guy, so you can have him and Fuller stretching the field, and QT and Hopkins can kind of be your intermediate route type guys, and Hopkins can even go deep too. So that offense is just really, really lethal. Tunsil played really, really well, but unfortunately they couldn't come away with that game. Drew Brees and that New Orleans Saints team turned it on in the second half. Michael Thomas was going off. Alvin Kamara was going off, or Kamara. And Will Lutz with an absolute missile from 58 yards out, 60 yards out to win the game. Superdome was going crazy. And I thought it was funny that everybody in the Superdome was wearing refs jerseys. I thought that was funny. And it was also funny because there was like a call at the end of the second half, and it was like, it was obviously, Michael Thomas obviously got the first down and they didn't give it to him, or they weren't giving it to him, and everybody's just like, boo, and it's just like, yikes, that's exactly what happened last year. They're just so pissed from last year. And also, Mike Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins, Nuke, those are top 2 wide receivers in the game. I don't want to hear anything else. No, I'm not talking AB, Julio, Odell. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it right now, because it's Nuke, and it's Mike, and that's it. And we don't have to talk about it. No. Leave it in the comments if you think I'm wrong, or who do you think is the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL? Because it's not AB. I'm telling you that right now. It's not Julio, and it's not Odell. Those guys are top 5, but it's Nuke and Mike, and that's top 2, no third. That's it. And I also said earlier, talking about the Raiders games, I'm not sure if the Raiders are good or if the Broncos are that bad. I'm going to say that the Broncos are that bad because their offense is horrendous, but they also gave up 24 points to a Raiders offense that was like questionably bad last year, but is now questionably good this year. Like, they beefed up the offensive line, and they got Trent Brown and Colton Miller played. Trent Brown and Colton Miller played great. Did not expect Colton Miller to play that good, especially against Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. By the way, they have Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, Derek Wolfe, Draymond Jones. They've got another good interior pass rusher, Adam Gotsis, I think. The Denver Broncos didn't get a single sack. Not one. And they have all that talent on the offensive line. It was just crazy to me. And Josh Jacobs had a really, really good game. Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller and Derek Carr had really, really good games on the offensive side of the ball. Prayers up, first of all, prayers up for Garyon Conley. Had a really, really bad collision with Jonathan Abram. It was not intentional or anything like that. Jonathan Abrams just trying to make a play on a wide receiver that Garyon Conley was already like somewhat tackling. And Jonathan Abrams' thigh hit Garyon Conley in the head, and it kind of like compressed his spine a little bit, similar to what happened to what happened to Ryan Shazier. So prayers up for Garyon Conley. Jonathan Abram also had a really, really good game. His like face mask is like lopsided. He's like my favorite player in the NFL. Player not on my team, he's like my favorite player. I love Jonathan Abram coming out of Mississippi State. He was my favorite player to watch. Just super high energy, super high motor, loves to hit, loves to play football. He's just a football guy through and through, and I love him for that. And he definitely didn't mean anything by that to Garyon Conley. He went out and he balled the rest of the game to make up for that. So he had a really, really good game. And Josh Jacobs is the first player since LaDainian Tomlinson to have 100 yards from scrimmage and 2 rushing touchdowns in their NFL debut. So in that, he joined some pretty elite company. Another NFC West back. LaDainian Tomlinson was the greatest ever to ever do it. LT. He had I think he had the record for the most rushing touchdowns in an NFL season, or the most touchdowns from scrimmage in an NFL season for a position player who isn't a quarterback. So if Josh Jacobs can fit up to that billing, I think he'd be pretty well off. He'd probably end up in the Hall of Fame if he can end up playing like LT. And I know I look a little bit different right now. I had to leave from the last time that I recorded. I went to the gym, got some food, and came back. So that's why I look like I am partnered with Gymshark with this little cutoff right here. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you do like these types of videos, please leave a like and subscribe. It really would be appreciated by me. I would appreciate it very much. Don't know why I said it like that. But it really helped the channel grow too. Leave a comment about any game. If you're a fan of a team that played this weekend, if you have a fantasy take that you want me to know, if you just want to talk, start some banner down in the comments, let me know. Just type it down there. You know how the comment section works and how to use a keyboard. You're on the internet, for God's sakes. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I'm TJ, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.